Close your eyes for a moment and picture yourself in ancient Rome, not on a dusty battlefield or in the chaotic forum, but inside a lavish triclinium during an extravagant banquet. The low couches are arranged around tables groaning with food, but it's the air itself that captures your attention. It's thick, heavy, almost tactile with fragrance. It's not a single scent, but a symphony. The rich, earthy sweetness of myrrh from distant Arabia, the sharp, exotic kick of cinnamon from lands barely known, the delicate, almost heartbreakingly beautiful aroma of roses from Paestum, believed to bloom twice a year just to please the Romans. This was more than just pleasant air. This was a statement of power, wealth, and an almost magical control over nature itself. This intoxicating atmosphere was the direct result of one of Rome's most sophisticated and secretive arts, the creation of perfume. We often think of the Romans in terms of their legions, their aqueducts, and their laws, but their pursuit of luxury was just as revolutionary. Perfume making was not a simple hobby. It was a highly complex and lucrative industry, a craft guarded by artisans who possessed knowledge that seems astonishing even today. These weren't just pleasant liquids in beautiful bottles. They were status symbols, medicinal remedies, and essential components of religious rituals. The secrets behind these ancient scents, the surprising and sometimes shocking ingredients, the intricate distillation and enfleurage processes, all of it was carefully guarded, a body of knowledge that connected the practical Roman mind with a deep, almost spiritual desire to capture beauty itself. And that is the hidden world we are going to explore together today. We're going to journey beyond the banquet and into the workshops to uncover how the Romans turned raw, often bizarre materials into the most sought-after fragrances in the ancient world. We will reveal the surprising sources of their scents, from the expected petals to the utterly unexpected, and decode the complex methods they use without any of our modern technology. This is a story of artistry, commerce, and secrets buried for centuries, a story that allows us to smell the past in a way we never thought possible. So get ready, because we are about to pull back the curtain on the extraordinary secrets of Roman perfume making. To truly understand why the Romans invested so much effort and wealth into perfume, we have to move beyond our modern view of fragrance as a simple personal accessory. For them, scent was a fundamental force woven into the very fabric of daily life, a tool for communication, protection, and connection with the divine. It began in the most sacred of spaces, the temple. Before any important public event or battle, Romans would offer sacrifices to the gods, and these rituals were incomplete without clouds of fragrant smoke from incense made of frankincense and myrrh. This wasn't just about creating a pleasant atmosphere. It was about sending a direct olfactory message to the heavens. The gods were believed to be pleased by sweet smells, and a well-perfumed sacrifice was a sign of respect and piety, increasing the chances of a favorable response. So from the outset, perfume was a medium for interacting with the supernatural world. This connection to the divine seamlessly blended into the political and social arena. In the public baths, which were centers of social life, perfume was absolutely essential. After bathing, Romans would anoint their bodies with scented oils. But this wasn't merely about masking body odor, the type of fragrance you wore broadcast your status and taste. A senator might choose a bold, complex scent with expensive spices like cardamom or saffron to project authority and worldliness, while a wealthy merchant's wife might prefer a delicate floral blend to display her refinement and wealth. Rubbing on a perfume was like putting on a uniform or a piece of jewelry. It communicated your place in the intricate social hierarchy before you even spoke a word. At the legendary feasts of the elite, servants would even anoint the feet of guests with precious perfumes, a stunning display of hospitality that also served as a blatant demonstration of the host's vast resources. The air itself became a testament to their power, but the Roman belief in the power of scent went even deeper, into the realm of health and well-being. They operated on a principle known as miasma theory, which suggested that diseases were spread through foul-smelling air. Therefore, fragrant air was quite literally seen as clean, healthy air. They believed that carrying a small ball of solid perfume, often made from myrrh or cinnamon, could act as a protective amulet against plague and illness. Specific scents were also thought to have direct effects on a person's mood and mental state. The fragrance of roses was considered soothing and was used to combat melancholy, while sharper scents like marjoram or thyme were believed to invigorate the mind and sharpen the senses. This practical, almost medicinal application of perfume made it a daily necessity, not just a luxury. It was a form of preventive medicine and emotional regulation, a way to armor oneself against the physical and psychological challenges of life. This profound belief in the transformative, almost magical power of fragrance is what elevated perfume making from a simple craft to a highly valued and closely guarded secret, a body of knowledge as powerful as it was precious. All of this profound cultural meaning, this deep-seated belief in the power of scent, created an almost insatiable demand to satisfy the Roman nose. You couldn't just stroll down to a local market and pick a few flowers. The creation of these complex fragrances required a supply chain that was nothing short of miraculous for its time, a network that stretched to the very edges of the known world and beyond. Think about the sheer logistics. A wealthy Roman woman in her villa on the Palatine Hill might anoint herself with an oil-containing myrrh that began its life as a gummy resin tapped from a scraggly tree in the arid, mountainous regions of southern Arabia Felix, modern-day Yemen and Oman. That single ingredient would have traveled thousands of miles by camel caravan, by ship across treacherous seas, and by cart over rugged Roman roads, passing through countless hands before reaching the perfumer's workshop. This wasn't just a trade in goods, it was a monumental feat of human endeavor. The quest for frankincense and myrrh is perhaps the most legendary example. These aromatic resins were so central to Roman religious and social life that their acquisition became a matter of economic and strategic importance. The source was a closely guarded secret by Arab traders for centuries, who spun fantastical tales to protect their monopoly. They spoke of phoenixes guarding the trees and of deadly serpents inhabiting the groves. The Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder wrote about the extreme measures taken, noting that the frankincense harvest was considered so sacred that the harvesters had to undergo ritual purification and were forbidden from engaging in any form of profane activity during the season. The resin was so valuable that it was literally worth its weight in gold, financing entire kingdoms in southern Arabia. When a Roman purchased a vial of perfume containing these resins, they weren't just buying a scent, they were buying a piece of a dangerous, mysterious, and incredibly expensive journey. But the ingredient list didn't stop there. To create the delicate floral notes, Romans turned to the famous rose gardens of Paestum in southern Italy, which were said to bloom twice a year, and also imported vast quantities from even further east, from Persia. Then there was saffron, the most expensive spice in the ancient world, harvested from the delicate stigmas of the crocus flower. It took over 70,000 flowers to produce just 1 pound of saffron, and it was primarily cultivated in Greece, in places like Cilicia. Its inclusion in a perfume added a unique hay-like, slightly bitter aroma and a stunning golden yellow color, a visible sign of the perfume's exorbitant cost. Other ingredients poured in from every corner of the empire: spikenard from the Himalayas shipped through India, cinnamon and cassia from Sri Lanka and China, arriving via complex overland and maritime routes, and even a bizarre ingredient called onycha, which was actually the ground-up operculum, a small plate from a shellfish found in the Red Sea. This massive influx of raw materials had a profound economic impact that rippled far beyond the perfume shops of Rome. The demand for these exotic goods created immense wealth for merchants who dared to undertake the long and perilous journeys. It funded the construction of ships and the establishment of trading posts in foreign lands, effectively driving exploration and expanding the Roman understanding of geography. The Roman government, recognizing the value of this trade, levied hefty taxes and customs duties on these luxury items, filling the state's coffers. This commerce became so vital that the Roman Emperor Augustus, after securing peace, proudly proclaimed that he had opened up the seas and made them safe for merchants, directly linking imperial power to the safe passage of luxury goods like perfume ingredients. The scent that wafted through a Roman banquet hall was in reality the smell of a globalized economy, a testament to the vast commercial and logistical machine that was the Roman Empire, all concentrated into a few precious drops of oil. But with such an incredible array of exotic ingredients arriving from across the globe, the Roman perfumers faced a critical challenge, one that gets to the very heart of their craft. How do you capture these fleeting, volatile aromas, How do you trap the essence of a rose blossom or the smoky soul of myrrh resin and make it last for months, even years? The answer to this question reveals the first and perhaps most fundamental secret of their art, a secret that might surprise anyone familiar with modern fragrances. It wasn't a secret ingredient in the sense of something rare and expensive, but a secret in its foundational role. While today we base our perfumes in alcohol, the Romans used something entirely different, something that was both utterly common and absolutely essential to their entire civilization: olive oil. This choice was not a matter of primitive technology or a lack of alternatives. It was a deliberate and brilliant solution to a specific problem: alcohol, which we use because it evaporates quickly, carrying the scent molecules into the air in a burst of fragrance, was known to the Romans. They certainly had wine and other spirits. However, they understood that for a scent to have lasting power on the skin, to linger and develop throughout the day, they needed a medium that was itself slow to evaporate. Olive oil is a fatty substance, and these fats are excellent at absorbing and locking in the aromatic compounds from flowers, spices, and resins. Instead of a quick, bright explosion of scent, an oil-based perfume released its fragrance gradually, in a slow, warm, and intimate whisper that melded with the wearer's own body heat. This created a much more personal and enduring scent experience, one that was deeply valued. The type of olive oil used was not a trivial matter. It was a primary factor in determining the final quality and cost of the perfume. The very best perfumes were made with omphacium, a very specific and highly prized oil. This wasn't oil from ripe olives, but rather from green, unripe olives that were pressed while still on the tree. The result was a pale, almost colorless oil with a very light, subtly green scent of its own that would not compete with or overpower the delicate aromatics being added to it. Using omphacium was like painting on a pristine white canvas. It allowed the true colors, or in this case, the true scents, to shine through without distortion. Naturally, this made it incredibly expensive and reserved for the most exclusive fragrances, destined for the imperial household or the senatorial elite. For more everyday perfumes, artisans would use higher quality versions of regular ripe olive oil, but they went to great lengths to refine it. Raw olive oil has a strong, distinctive smell that would ruin a delicate floral blend. To solve this, perfumers would repeatedly wash the oil, sometimes with seawater or mild aromatic waters, and then expose it to sunlight for extended periods in wide, shallow containers. This process, known as deodorizing, would bleach the oil and significantly reduce its native aroma, creating a much more neutral base. The quality of this base oil was a direct reflection of the perfumer's skill and the product's intended market. A cheaper perfume might use a less refined oil, which would impart its own slightly fruity or peppery character to the mix, creating a heavier, less sophisticated fragrance. The choice of base was therefore the first and most important decision in the entire creation process, setting the stage for everything that followed and ultimately determining whether the final product would be a masterpiece of subtlety or a simpler, more robust concoction. So now we have our base, this carefully prepared olive oil, ready to receive the aromatic treasures of the empire. But here the perfumer faced the greatest challenge of all, a problem that remains at the forefront of fragrance creation even today: the fleeting nature of scent. Essential oils, those precious extracts from petals and spices, are volatile. They want to escape into the air to disappear. If you simply mixed rose oil into your omphacium, you'd have a beautiful fragrance for a few hours, maybe a day, but then it would fade, leaving behind only the faint smell of the oil itself. For a scent to be truly valuable, to justify its astronomical cost, it had to possess longevity. It had to cling to the skin and to clothing for days. The secret to achieving this near magical persistence lay in a class of ingredients known as fixatives or mordants, and their use was the most closely guarded secret in a perfumer's arsenal. These fixatives worked not by adding a dominant scent of their own, but by acting as a chemical anchor. Think of the volatile scent molecules as tiny, hyperactive boats, all wanting to sail away on the air currents. A fixative is like a heavy, intricate net that sinks beneath the surface of the oil, capturing these boats and slowing their escape dramatically. It binds with the lighter aromatics, creating a heavier, more complex molecule that evaporates at a much slower rate. This process doesn't just make the scent last longer, it fundamentally changes how it develops on the skin, allowing the fragrance to unfold in stages. revealing different notes over time in a way that a simple, quick evaporating mixture never could. The choice of fixative was therefore as important as the choice of the primary scent notes themselves. The most revered fixatives came from the plant kingdom, and myrrh was a quintessential example. While we think of myrrh as a fragrance in its own right, with its deep, smoky, slightly medicinal aroma, its real power in perfume making was as a backbone. When added to a floral blend, the myrrh resin would dissolve slowly into the oil, its heavier, balsamic molecules providing a stable foundation. A perfume based on rose and saffron might be bright and immediately appealing, but with myrrh as a fixative, the initial floral burst would gradually give way to the resin's warmer, earthier base notes, creating a scent that felt richer, more profound, and infinitely more durable. It was the difference between a single brilliant flash of light and a long, slow-burning ember. Then there were the more exotic and controversial fixatives, ingredients that would seem utterly bizarre to the modern nose. Costus root imported from the Himalayas was highly prized. It had a peculiar animalic scent often described as a mix of violet, orris root, and damp fir. In tiny quantities, it acted as a powerful fixative for woody and spicy perfumes, adding a wild, earthy depth that anchored brighter notes. But perhaps the most fascinating and secretive category of fixatives were those derived from animals. The Romans understood that some of the most tenacious smells in nature came from the animal kingdom, and they learned to harness these very aromas to make their perfumes endure. One of the most famous was castoreum, a substance secreted from the castor sacs of beavers. To the modern mind, the idea of using beaver gland secretion in perfume is shocking, but to a Roman perfumer, it was pure alchemy. Castoreum has a complex scent profile, initially sharp and urinous, but when highly diluted and aged, it develops a warm, leathery, almost sweet aroma reminiscent of Russian leather and tobacco. More importantly, its waxy, fatty composition made it an exceptionally effective fixative. A single drop of castoreum in a large batch of perfume would bind the entire composition together, giving it incredible staying power and a sensual, skin-like quality that floral scents alone could never achieve. Other animalic fixatives included ambergris, a waxy substance formed in the digestive system of sperm whales, which washed up on beaches and was valued for its unique marine, sweet scent, and civet, a sharp paste from the civet cat. The use of these ingredients was a testament to the Romans' empirical, almost ruthless pragmatism. They were not squeamish. If an ingredient worked, if it could transform a fleeting pleasure into a lasting luxury, it was worth its weight in gold. The precise recipes and ratios for combining these fixatives with the primary scents were the true trade secrets of the unguentarii, the Roman perfumers. A master perfumer's formula book would have been more valuable than the shop itself. It wasn't just a matter of adding myrrh or castoreum. It was about understanding the precise quantity needed to anchor a delicate lily without overwhelming it, or knowing how to blend costus root with cinnamon to create a spicy fragrance that would last through an entire day of public affairs. The wrong combination could result in a muddled, unpleasant scent that either faded too quickly or was dominated by the heavy, funereal smell of the fixative itself. This deep experiential knowledge, passed down from master to apprentice, was what separated a common scented oil from a legendary Roman perfume, a creation that could capture time itself in a bottle. With our foundation of olive oil and our secret arsenal of fixatives firmly established, we arrive at the true pinnacle of the Roman perfumer's art, a technique so delicate and labor-intensive it borders on pure magic. This is the process of enfleurage, reserved exclusively for the most fragile and evanescent of floral aromas, the ones that would be utterly destroyed by heat. Imagine trying to capture the soul of a rose. If you tried to heat it, to boil or steam it like you would a hardy spice, that beautiful, complex scent would simply vanish, leaving behind a flat, cooked, and utterly disappointing shadow of itself. For flowers like roses, jasmine, and violets, the Romans needed a different approach, one of immense patience and a deep understanding of chemistry. They needed to coax the fragrance out, not force it. The principle behind enfleurage is deceptively simple, yet its execution required a master's touch. It all revolved around a fundamental property of fats, their incredible ability to absorb scent. The process began with the creation of what was essentially a fragrance sandwich. Artisans would take large, flat wooden frames, usually made of cypress or cedar for their own pleasant and insect-repelling qualities, and instead of glass, these frames held panes of purified fat. This fat could be a highly refined animal fat like suet, or more commonly, a solid form of our old friend olive oil, sometimes mixed with other fats to achieve the perfect consistency. This fat had to be odorless, pure, and spread into a perfectly smooth, cool surface. Then came the most critical and time-sensitive part, the flowers. At the absolute peak of their bloom, often picked just before dawn, when their aromatic oils were most concentrated, thousands upon thousands of petals were carefully harvested. These petals were not thrown in, they were meticulously placed one by one onto the layer of fat, creating a single, dense carpet of blossoms. Then another fat-covered frame would be placed on top, pressing the petals gently but firmly between two layers of this fragrant, hungry substance. The frames would then be stacked and left in a cool, dark room, and then the waiting began. For days, sometimes even weeks, the magic would happen. The volatile scent molecules, the very essence of the flower, would slowly, naturally migrate from the petals into the fat. It was a passive transfer, a gentle surrender of aroma without any violent application of heat. After this long period of absorption, the now wilted, scent-depleted petals would be carefully scraped away. But the job wasn't done. To create a product of the highest concentration, this process was repeated again and again, with fresh batches of petals placed onto the same fat. Each new layer of blossoms would replenish and intensify the floral essence captured within the fat. This could go on for dozens of cycles until the fat was deemed to be supersaturated with the flower's soul, transformed into what was called a pomade. This pomade, this flower-infused fat, was a product of breathtaking value in itself, but to create the final liquid perfume, this pomade would then be washed in warm alcohol, which would strip the scent from the fat, leaving behind the pure floral absolute suspended in the spirit. The fat, now depleted of its aromatic treasure, could often be reused, starting the cycle anew. So why go through all this trouble? Why this monumental effort when other, faster methods existed? The answer lies in the quality of the scent itself. Enfleurage was prized above all other methods because it captured the most authentic, the most complete, and the most vibrant expression of the living flower. Heat-based distillation, even the gentle steam distillation the Romans used for hardier materials, always alters the chemical composition of the scent. It can create harsh, cooked notes and destroy the most delicate top notes, the very first impressions of a fragrance. Enfleurage, by contrast, preserved the full spectrum of the flower's aroma. A rose perfume made through enfleurage didn't just smell generically floral, it smelled like you had just buried your face in a freshly bloomed rose in a dewy garden at sunrise. It contained the subtle green notes from the calyx, the honeyed sweetness of the nectar, and the crisp, airy quality of the petals themselves. It was the difference between a photograph and a living memory. This unparalleled quality made enfleurage a highly guarded technique, a trade secret known only to the most elite unguentarii. The specific types of fat used, the ideal temperature of the room, the precise duration for each flower type, the number of repetitions needed, all of this was proprietary knowledge passed down through generations. A perfumer who mastered enfleurage could command exorbitant prices, catering to an elite clientele for whom only the most true-to-life, exquisite floral scent would suffice. It was the ultimate luxury, a testament to the Roman willingness to invest staggering amounts of time and labor in the relentless pursuit of sensory perfection. While enfleurage was a masterpiece of patience for capturing delicate florals, the Romans had another more powerful tool in their arsenal for tougher materials like spices, barks, and resins, a technology that challenges our entire timeline of scientific history. We often associate the invention of distillation with medieval alchemists or the Islamic Golden Age, but there is compelling evidence to suggest the Romans were experimenting with the fundamental principles of separating substances through heat and condensation centuries earlier. Imagine a Roman workshop not just with mortars and pestles, but with complex glassware, tubes, and flames, a scene that looks more like a proto-chemistry lab than an ancient artisan's stall. This is not mere speculation. It's supported by archaeological discoveries that force us to reconsider the technological sophistication of the Roman perfumer. The most telling evidence comes in the form of a specific artifact, the alembic. The alembic is the classic distillation apparatus, consisting of a heated pot where the raw material is placed, a domed cap or head to collect the vapors, and a coiled tube or worm where those vapors cool and condense back into a liquid. Fragments of glassware fitting this precise description have been found at several Roman sites. Furthermore, the writings of figures like Zosimus of Panopolis and Greco-Egyptian alchemists working in the 3rd and 4th centuries describe processes for distilling liquids that are unmistakably similar to the method we would recognize today. While Zosimus was focused on alchemical pursuits, it stands to reason that the same technology was being adapted by practical-minded artisans for more commercial applications, like perfume making. This wasn't about turning lead into gold, it was about turning a vat of simmering rose petals into a few precious drops of concentrated essence. The advantage of distillation, even in its most primitive form, was revolutionary. Instead of simply infusing a base oil with scent by letting materials soak for weeks, distillation allowed the Romans to separate the pure aromatic compounds from the plant matter itself. For a spice like cinnamon, this meant they could produce a far more potent and uniform cinnamon oil, free from the woody particles and impurities that would be present in a simple infusion. This process, known as destructive distillation or dry distillation, involved heating the solid material in a closed vessel. The volatile aromatic oils would vaporize, travel through the apparatus, and then drip out as a concentrated liquid. The result was a clearer, stronger, and more sophisticated ingredient, allowing perfumers to create blends with greater complexity and intensity than ever before. A perfume made with distilled oils would have a brighter, more immediate impact and a different character than one created solely through enfleurage or maceration. However, this is where the historical debate gets truly fascinating. While the existence of the technology is hard to deny, historians are divided on how widespread and refined its use actually was in the perfume industry. The archaeological evidence, while compelling, is still fragmentary. The sophisticated glassware required for effective distillation was incredibly expensive and difficult to produce, likely limiting its use to only the most elite and well-funded workshops, perhaps those directly supplying the imperial court. It's entirely possible that what we see are the experiments of a brilliant few, an advanced technique that never became standard practice across the empire. The vast majority of Roman perfumes were probably made using the slower, more accessible methods of infusion and enfleurage. The question then becomes, were the Romans masters of distillation, or were they just beginning to unlock its potential, standing on the precipice of a chemical revolution that would later be fully realized by other cultures? This ambiguity adds a profound layer of mystery to their technological prowess. It suggests a society with a vibrant, empirical approach to science, one where artisans were constantly pushing the boundaries of their materials. The Roman perfumer was part chemist, part artist, and part mystic. They may not have fully understood the molecular principles behind distillation, but they observed that heat could transform solids into vapors, and that those vapors could be captured and transformed again into a purer, more powerful liquid. This practical, hands-on innovation is a hallmark of Roman engineering, whether in building aqueducts or crafting scents. The possibility that they were quietly pioneering a technology we credit to later eras forces us to smell their creations with a new sense of wonder. That vial of ancient perfume might not just contain the scent of roses and myrrh, it might also hold the faint, brilliant aroma of a lost scientific discovery. Now let's step out of the theoretical and into the tangible, away from isolated techniques and into the very heart of the industry. To truly grasp the scale and spirit of Roman perfume making, we need to walk down a specific, legendary street, a place whose name became synonymous with the craft itself, the Saplasia in Capua. If Rome was the empire's political capital, Capua in the fertile region of Campania was its undisputed perfume capital. The Saplasia wasn't just a street, it was a district, a buzzing, aromatic industrial quarter where the entire process, from raw material to finished luxury product, unfolded in a chaotic, secretive, and breathtakingly efficient symphony. As you turned onto the Saplasia, the first thing to strike you wouldn't be a sight, but a smell so powerful and complex it was almost a physical presence. It was an olfactory wave, a layered tapestry of aromas that told the story of the known world. One moment your nose would be filled with the sweet, almost intoxicating scent of thousands of rose petals from Peastum, just a short journey away. The next, a gust of wind would bring the sharp medicinal punch of myrrh from a warehouse storing freshly arrived Arabian resins, then cutting through it all, the warm, comforting aroma of vast quantities of high-quality olive oil, gently heating in enormous copper vats. This was not a single pleasant fragrance. It was the smell of commerce, artistry, and global connection, an overwhelming blend that announced you had entered a world apart. The workshops lining the street were not designed for public viewing. They were functional, often cramped spaces, their doors open to the street to let in light and air, but with their most sensitive operations hidden from prying eyes. Inside, the air would be thick with the steam from simmering infusions and the dust from grinding roots and barks. The master perfumer, the unguentarii, was more than a shopkeeper. He was a conductor of this aromatic orchestra. Surrounded by his apprentices, he would move between stations, his experienced nose constantly evaluating the progress of a dozen different concoctions. In one corner, an apprentice might be meticulously washing a new batch of olive oil, repeatedly agitating it in large terracotta jars to remove its native scent. In another, someone would be carefully weighing out minuscule amounts of precious saffron or crushed costus root on a delicate bronze scale, their hands steady under the watchful eye of the master. The tools of the trade were everywhere, stone mortars and pestles stained deep red from madder root or yellow from saffron, stood ready for grinding. Rows of glass and pottery vessels, each marked with a code known only to the unguentarii, held infusions in various stages of completion, some just begun, others having macerated for months. And for the most elite workshops, there might be a special locked cabinet containing the rare and expensive glassware for distillation, the alembics and receiving flasks that represented the cutting edge of the craft. The soundscape was just as rich, the rhythmic grinding of spices, the gentle bubble of oils over low fires, the hushed, serious conversations between the master and his trainees as they debated the exact moment to add a fixative or strain a batch. This was a place of intense, guarded knowledge where a single misstep could ruin a fortune's worth of ingredients, but the Saplesia was also a brutally commercial environment. This was not an artist's isolated studio, it was a factory for luxury. The street would have been crowded not just with workers, but with merchants haggling over prices for a shipment of cinnamon, and with wealthy clients or their stewards arriving to place custom orders. The reputation of an unguentarii from the Saplesia was his most valuable asset. A perfume created here wasn't just a product, it was a brand. The name of a famous perfumer could command prices that would make a senator blush, and the formulas developed in these smoky, fragrant workshops were protected with a secrecy we would associate with state secrets today. The Saplesia was therefore a fascinating paradox, a place of open, bustling commerce built upon a foundation of fiercely protected, closed-door artistry. It was the engine room of Roman desire, the place where the empire's vast resources and insatiable appetite for beauty were transformed, drop by precious drop, into the scents that defined an era. This relentless innovation and global trade, this entire world centered on places like the Saplesia, ultimately produced finished products, legendary perfumes with names that have echoed through history. But what was actually inside those beautiful, often intricately crafted glass and alabaster bottles? How did all these techniques and ingredients come together into a specific, recognizable fragrance? Fortunately, we are not left completely in the dark. A handful of these ancient recipes have survived, preserved not in perfumers' manuals, but in the pages of natural historians and encyclopedists. The most famous of these sources is Pliny the Elder, whose massive work, Natural History, serves as an astonishingly detailed snapshot of Roman knowledge, including the secrets of the unguentarii. Pliny provides us with a priceless window into this lost world, but it's a window made of frosted glass. His descriptions are often frustratingly brief, more like a list of ingredients for a banquet than a precise formula for a chemist. He might tell us that a famous perfume contained myrrh, cinnamon, and rose, but he rarely gives us the exact quantities, the specific type of oil used as a base, or the crucial order of operations. It's as if a future historian were trying to recreate a classic dish, knowing only that it contained flour, sugar, and eggs, without any instructions for mixing or baking. This vagueness was likely intentional. These were valuable trade secrets, and Pliny was an observer, not a practitioner. He recorded what he could learn, but the true masters of the craft kept their most critical knowledge locked away in their own memories. One of the most celebrated recipes he does describe is for a perfume known as rhodinum, a rose scent that was the epitome of Roman luxury. According to Pliny, the ingredients for rhodinum were deceptively simple: rose petals, of course, but also a gum resin called labdanum, honey, salt, and myrrh, all infused into a base of the finest omphacium oil. To the modern reader, this list is baffling. Rose and myrrh make sense, but honey, salt, these seem like ingredients from a kitchen, not a perfumer's workshop. Yet each component had a very specific and clever purpose. The rose petals provided the primary floral heart of the fragrance. The myrrh, as we've learned, acted as a powerful fixative to give the scent longevity. The labdanum, a resin from the rockrose plant, added a deep, amber-like leathery note that would have given the perfume a rich, complex base, but the honey and salt are where the true ingenuity of the Roman perfumer shines through. Honey is a humectant. It helps to retain moisture. In a perfume, it would have given the final oil a slightly thicker, more unctuous texture, making it feel more luxurious on the skin. It might also have contributed a very subtle, sweet undertone that complemented the natural sweetness of the rose. The salt, however, is the real masterstroke. When added during the initial maceration process, salt acts as a catalyst. It helps to break down the plant cells in the rose petals, effectively forcing them to release their aromatic oils more quickly and completely into the warm oil. This simple, everyday substance was a tool for efficiency, ensuring that not a single drop of the precious rose essence was wasted. So how would a perfumer have actually made rhodinum? We can speculate on the steps based on our understanding of their methods. First, the omphacium oil would be gently warmed in a wide, shallow bronze or terracotta vessel. Then a large quantity of fresh rose petals will be added, along with a pinch of salt and perhaps a small amount of honey. This mixture will be left to macerate for days, maybe even weeks, with the perfumer stirring it regularly. After this, the solid materials will be strained out, and the now rose-infused oil will be returned to the heat. This is when the myrrh and labdanum would be added. These solid resins would slowly dissolve into the warm oil, imparting their deep balsamic scents and, crucially, acting as that all-important fixative. The final step would be to let the perfume age, perhaps for several months, allowing all the elements to fully harmonize into a single, seamless fragrance. This process of historical recreation, however, is fraught with immense challenges for modern historians and perfumers who attempt it. The first and greatest obstacle is the ingredients themselves. Can we truly source authentic components? The roses grown in Paestum 2,000 years ago were a specific variety, cultivated in a specific soil and climate. A modern rose, even of a similar type, will have a different chemical signature. The omphacium oil from green olives is not a standard commercial product today. Recreating it requires a specialized and costly process. And what about the quality of the myrrh? Its scent profile can vary dramatically depending on its region of origin and harvesting techniques. Using a generic myrrh from a modern supplier might produce a scent that is a pale imitation of the original. Beyond the ingredients, the ambiguity of the instructions leaves vast room for interpretation. How much salt is a pinch? How long is long enough to macerate the petals? Was the honey added at the beginning or the end? A slight variation in any of these factors can lead to a completely different final product. One recreation might yield a light floral scent that fades in an hour, while another, with a longer maceration and more fixative, could produce a dark, intense fragrance that is overpowering. There is no single definitive version of rhodinum. There are only interpretations, each one an educated guess that brings us a little closer, but never fully allows us to smell the past as the Romans did. This elusive quest for authenticity is what makes the study of ancient perfumery so compelling. It is a detective story where the final clue is a scent that evaporated centuries ago. But as we've moved from the bustling workshops of the Saplesia to the specific recipes for legendary scents like rhodinum, a much deeper layer of meaning begins to emerge. For the Romans, a perfume was never just a pleasant smell. It was a complex language, a sophisticated code where every ingredient carried a specific symbolic weight. Choosing a fragrance was a deliberate act of communication. a way to send a nuanced message about your social standing, your personal desires, and even your spiritual beliefs without uttering a single word. Understanding this symbolic language is the final key to unlocking the true power these scents held in the ancient world. The rose, for instance, was far more than a beautiful flower. It was intrinsically linked to Venus, the goddess of love, beauty, and desire, to where a rose-based perfume like rhodonum was to openly align oneself with these qualities. It was an invitation, a declaration of availability or romantic intent, especially potent in the highly formalized rituals of courtship and seduction among the Roman elite. The scent of roses whispered of lavish banquets, of private gardens, and of the intoxicating power of attraction, making it an essential tool in the arsenal of anyone wishing to project an aura of allure and sophistication. In stark contrast, the deep, smoky, and slightly bitter aroma of myrrh resided in a completely different symbolic realm. While it was certainly used in luxury perfumes for its remarkable fixative properties, its primary and most powerful association was with death and the afterlife. Myrrh was an essential component of funeral rites, burned on pyres and used to anoint the bodies of the deceased to mask the scent of decay and honor their passing. This funerary connection was so strong that wearing a perfume dominated by myrrh in an everyday social setting could convey a sense of solemnity, piety, or even mourning. It was a scent that spoke of tradition, of respect for one's ancestors, and of the sober acceptance of mortality. Choosing to wear myrrh was a serious statement, one that communicated a connection to the sacred and the eternal, far removed from the fleeting passions of the rose. Then there was saffron, the ultimate symbol of sheer, unadulterated power and wealth. As we've discussed, its cost was astronomical, requiring the labor of tens of thousands of flowers for just a small amount. But its significance went beyond its price tag. Saffron's brilliant golden yellow color mirrored that of gold itself, and its distinct, pungent, and honey-like aroma was unmistakable. To wear a perfume infused with saffron was to make a bold, almost aggressive statement of one's economic and social position. It was the olfactory equivalent of wearing a solid gold bracelet or a purple-bordered toga, items restricted by sumptuary laws to the highest echelons of society. A senator appearing in the forum wearing a saffron scent was not just smelling pleasant, he was broadcasting his authority, his access to global trade networks, and his right to lead. It was a fragrance of command, one that demanded attention and respect through its very expense and rarity. This intricate vocabulary of scents allowed Romans to construct a personal identity in a remarkably subtle way. A young patrician woman might blend rose and a touch of costus root to project an image that was both conventionally attractive and intriguingly exotic. A successful general, seeking to emphasize both his piety and his worldly power, might choose a complex fragrance balancing the solemnity of myrrh with the opulence of saffron and the spice of cinnamon. Even the choice to wear a very light, simple scent made from local herbs could be a deliberate message, perhaps signaling stoic virtues of modesty and self-sufficiency. In a society with rigid social hierarchies and complex codes of public conduct, perfume offered a rare avenue for personal expression, a way to hint at one's inner world, aspirations, and alliances without breaking any formal rules. It was a nonverbal dialogue conducted through the air, a sophisticated game of social chess where every aromatic note was a carefully considered move. And this powerful symbolic language of scent, used to communicate status and desire, had an even more profound dimension, one that reached into the very core of human health and well-being. For the Romans, the line between a perfume and a medicine was often invisible. They believed that fragrant oils possessed the power to heal the body, calm the mind, and even ward off deadly diseases. This wasn't a matter of simple aromatherapy as we might think of it today. It was a sophisticated medical system rooted in the dominant scientific theory of the ancient world, humoral theory. According to this principle, championed by the Greek physician Galen, who became famous in Rome, health was a state of perfect balance between four vital fluids or humors within the body: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. An excess or deficiency of any one humor was believed to cause illness. A fever, for instance, indicated an excess of hot, fiery yellow bile, while lethargy and depression suggested an overabundance of cold, moist phlegm. The goal of treatment was to restore this delicate equilibrium. This is where the profound connection to perfume comes in. Romans classified scents not just by how pleasant they were, but by their inherent elemental qualities, whether they were hot or cold, dry or moist. A physician would diagnose a patient's humoral imbalance and then prescribe a specific scent to counteract it. If someone was suffering from a headache, understood as a hot, dry condition of the head caused by too much yellow bile, the remedy would be a cooling, moistening fragrance. Lavender, with its fresh, clean aroma, was considered a prime example of a cooling scent. A perfumed oil infused with lavender would be gently massaged into the temples to draw out the excess heat and restore balance. Conversely, a digestive issue like bloating or sluggishness was seen as a cold, damp problem related to an excessive phlegm. To counter this, a doctor might prescribe a warming, drying scent like peppermint or marjoram. The patient would inhale the aroma deeply or consume a small amount of the scented oil in a drink, believing the essential warmth of the spice would stimulate the digestive system and drive out the cold dampness. This belief extended to the most feared illnesses of the ancient world. During times of plague, the air itself was thought to be poisoned by miasma, a foul disease-causing vapor. The logical defense, therefore, was to purify the air with strong protective fragrances. Streets and homes would be fumigated with the smoke of burning sulfur and pitch, but for personal protection, citizens would carry small, perforated perfume balls, often made of solid myrrh or ambergris, or wear aromatic necklaces filled with protective herbs like rue and garlic. They believed these potent scents created a protective bubble of clean, wholesome air around the individual, effectively repelling the invisible agents of disease. While we now understand the true mechanisms of contagion, their approach had a kernel of practical sense. Many of these aromatic plants do possess genuine antimicrobial properties. This intimate link between healing and fragrance meant that the perfumer's workshop and the physician's clinic were natural allies. The unguentarii was as much an apothecary as an artist, and the most skilled physicians would have maintained close relationships with trusted perfumers to ensure a supply of high-quality, properly prepared medicated oils. These weren't simple infusions, they were complex preparations. A therapeutic oil for soothing muscle pains might involve steeping herbs like arnica and rosemary in a base oil for weeks, then straining it and adding a fixative like beeswax to create a salve. The physician provided the medical knowledge and diagnosis, while the perfumer provided the technical expertise in extraction and preservation. It was a collaboration that blurred the lines between two highly respected professions, united by a shared belief in the power of plants. Nowhere was this therapeutic use of scent more integrated into daily life than in the Roman baths. A trip to the thermae was not just about getting clean, it was a comprehensive health and social ritual, and perfume was central to the experience. After exercising, scraping the skin with a strigil, and moving through the various temperature rooms, a Roman would finish with a full body massage using scented oils. This was not a simple luxury. The massage itself was therapeutic, working out muscle knots and improving circulation, but the choice of oil was medically prescribed. For an athlete looking to soothe inflamed muscles, the masseur might use an oil infused with warming, analgesic herbs like juniper or bay laurel. For someone seeking relaxation after a stressful day in the forum, a calming oil with chamomile or rose would be selected. The combination of therapeutic touch, warm surroundings, and the deliberate inhalation of a prescribed fragrance created a powerful multi-sensory treatment aimed at restoring both physical and mental balance. In this context, every drop of perfume was a potential remedy, and the act of anointing oneself was a daily practice of preventative health care, a tangible expression of the Roman ideal of a sound mind in a sound body, nurtured by the secret arts of the perfumer and the healer. Yet for all its symbolic and therapeutic power, the most spectacular demonstration of perfume's supreme status in Rome was reserved for the imperial palace itself, where personal preference became a matter of state-level extravagance. No figure embodies this obsessive relationship with scent more than the infamous Emperor Nero, a man whose name became synonymous with excess. While history remembers him for the Great Fire of Rome and his persecution of Christians, ancient writers like Suetonius and Pliny meticulously recorded his equally notorious passion for perfume, particularly his fanatical devotion to the rose. For Nero, a pleasant aroma was not a mere accessory, it was an essential element of his imperial persona, a tool to project an image of godlike power and untouchable luxury. His expenditures on fragrance were so colossal that they likely strained the imperial treasury, making his personal tastes a genuine economic force within the empire. Imagine the scene at one of Nero's legendary feasts, an event designed to overwhelm every sense. Guests would not simply find their feet anointed with oil upon arrival, they would be subjected to a full-scale aromatic assault. The most famous accounts describe how the ceilings of his dining halls were fitted with hidden ivory panels that could be pivoted open at a signal, releasing a veritable snowfall of rose petals upon the revelers below. But this was not a gentle, romantic sprinkle. The quantities were so immense that guests were occasionally in danger of being buried or even suffocated under the fragrant deluge. Silver pipes installed throughout the palace would gush not water, but the finest rose-scented perfume, filling the air with a visible, costly mist. Every dove released for entertainment had its wings dabbed with saffron-infused oil, so their flight would leave trails of the most expensive scent in the world. This was not subtlety, it was olfactory tyranny, a deliberate and overwhelming demonstration that the emperor commanded not just lands and legions, but the very air his subjects breathed. His wife, the ambitious and beautiful Poppaea Sabina, was his perfect match in this arena of scented one-upmanship. She understood that personal fragrance was the ultimate weapon in the courtly game of allure and influence. Historical sources claim she maintained her legendary complexion by bathing in the milk of 500 donkeys, but it was her perfume ritual that truly defined her daily life. Poppaea did not merely apply a scent, she was enveloped in it. She possessed a vast collection of solid perfumes, or solid unguentarii, each one a masterpiece crafted for a specific part of her body or a particular occasion. There would be one blend for her hair, another for her neck and décolletage, a stronger, more animalic fragrance perhaps containing castoreum for her wrists and pulse points, and lighter floral waters for the rest of her skin. Her baths were not just filled with donkey milk, but with infusions of rose and lavender, and after bathing, teams of slaves would anoint her from head to toe. The scale of her consumption was staggering. It is said that when she traveled, she required an entire caravan of mules dedicated solely to carrying her perfumes, shoes, and veils, with the fragrances given their own specially designed vessels to prevent breakage and spoilage. This personal apothecary on the move ensured that wherever Poppaea went, she could project the same consistent, intoxicating aura of power and desirability. For her, perfume was a mobile fortress of identity, a way to transport the meticulously crafted atmosphere of her Roman palace to any provincial outpost, ensuring that her status was never in doubt. Her signature scent, likely a complex blend of rose, myrrh, and exotic spices, would have announced her presence long before she entered a room, creating an intimidating and unforgettable impression. This imperial obsession with personal fragrance had a direct and powerful impact on the entire industry. When the emperor or empress developed a preference for a particular scent, it would instantly become the most coveted commodity in Rome. Perfumers who had the honor and immense pressure of supplying the imperial household would see their fortunes made overnight. Their workshops on the Saplesia would be inundated with orders from the senatorial class, all desperate to emulate the latest courtly fashion. Nero's love for rose single-handedly would have driven up the price of Paestum's roses to astronomical levels, enriching every merchant and farmer along that supply chain. The demand for saffron, cinnamon, and the rarest Arabian resins would have spiked correspondingly, affecting trade routes from the Himalayas to the Horn of Africa. The emperor's nose was quite literally a force that could reshape markets and dictate trends across the known world. Ultimately, the perfumed excesses of Nero and Poppaea were about more than just self-indulgence. They were a calculated performance of divinity. In the Eastern Hellenistic kingdoms that influenced Rome, rulers were often deified, and the use of extraordinary fragrances was a key part of that ritual. By surrounding himself with clouds of rose petals and cascades of perfumed water, Nero was creating a living environment that mirrored the mythical homes of the gods, who were said to dwell in eternally fragrant paradises. He was presenting himself not as a mortal man, but as a divine being whose every breath was filled with the essence of eternity. This sensory overload was intended to inspire awe, submission, and a belief in his superhuman status. The fact that this pursuit of olfactory divinity helped bankrupt the state and contributed to his eventual downfall adds a profound layer of irony to the story. a reminder that even the most powerful scents could not mask the harsh realities of power for long. But after such immense effort to create these precious liquids, how did the Romans ensure their masterpieces would last? The final secret wasn't in the formula itself, but in the exquisite vessel created to hold it. The humble container for Roman perfume was far from an afterthought. It was a masterpiece of design and artistry in its own right, known as an unguentarium. These were not simple jars, they were precision instruments, elegantly crafted to protect the valuable contents within from their greatest enemy, the air itself. The most common form was a work of beautiful simplicity, a long, slender bottle with a narrow neck and a small, often flared lip. This iconic shape wasn't just aesthetically pleasing, it was brilliantly functional. By minimizing the surface area of the oil exposed to the air, the narrow opening dramatically slowed down the process of evaporation and oxidation, which could turn a vibrant, expensive perfume into a stale, rancid oil. Some unguentarii even featured a small glass or ceramic stopper, sometimes sealed with wax or a bit of cloth, creating an almost airtight environment that could preserve a scent's integrity for years. The materials used were a direct reflection of the perfume's value and the owner's status. For everyday use or for less expensive fragrances, unguentarii were made of pottery or simple blown glass. But for the elite, the container was as much a part of the luxury experience as the scent. Skilled artisans created breathtaking vessels from colored glass, deep cobalt blues, emerald greens, and ambers that shimmered in the light. They employed techniques like milliphiry, where slices of colored glass canes were fused together to create intricate floral or geometric patterns. Some of the most luxurious containers were carved from semi-precious stones like alabaster, onyx, or rock crystal. Alabaster, with its soft, translucent white appearance, was particularly prized because it was naturally cool to the touch, which helped keep the perfumed oil stable. To own a perfume housed in an alabaster unguentarium was to possess an object of sublime beauty, where the vessel and its contents enhanced each other's value. This transformation of the container into a status symbol reached its zenith with the use of cameo glass. Imagine a small bottle no larger than your hand, made of deep blue glass. But layered onto this blue background is a meticulously carved white glass scene depicting a mythological figure, perhaps Venus emerging from the sea or Bacchus surrounded by vines. This wasn't just a container, it was a portable work of art, a tiny sculpture that declared the owner's immense wealth, refined taste, and access to the most skilled craftsmen in the empire. The creation of such an object was an immense undertaking, requiring multiple glass blowing and carving stages, and the cost would have been astronomical. A perfume presented in such a vessel was more than a personal accessory. It was a diplomatic gift, a treasured heirloom, a tangible piece of imperial prestige. The unguentarium, therefore, completed the story of Roman perfume. It was the perfect, beautiful, and intelligent coda to a process that began with a desert tree's resin and ended with a drop of liquid art, sealed for eternity. This deep-seated belief in the power of fragrance to influence health and project imperial power finds its most profound and ancient roots in the realm of the divine. To understand the Roman relationship with scent, we must begin not in the palace or the pharmacy, but in the temple, where perfume was not a luxury but a necessity, a fundamental medium for communication with the gods themselves. The air in a Roman temple during a sacrifice was not merely scented, it was thick with purpose, a visible aromatic plea rising to the heavens. The primary tool for this was incense, a substance we often associate with vague spirituality, but for the Romans it was a precise and powerful technology of worship. The most prized incenses were frankincense and myrrh, resins that, when placed on glowing charcoal, would smolder rather than burn, releasing dense, fragrant smoke. This smoke was believed to carry prayers and vows directly to the celestial realms. A sacrifice without this perfumed accompaniment was considered incomplete, almost rude, as if inviting a dignitary to a feast but offering no food. The gods, it was thought, were quite literally nourished by these sweet smells, and a generous offering increased the likelihood of a favorable response. This practice was rooted in a very tangible logic. In the Roman worldview, the divine was not entirely separate from the human experience. The gods had senses and preferences just like mortals, but elevated to a divine scale. A foul odor was associated with decay, disease, and miasma, the polluted air that brought plague. Conversely, a sweet, clean fragrance signaled purity, health, and life. By filling a sacred space with the most expensive and exotic aromas available, worshippers were creating an environment worthy of a deity's presence. They were in effect building a bridge of scent, an olfactory pathway designed to be more attractive to the god than any other place. Specific deities developed strong associations with particular scents, turning perfume into a form of divine address. Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, was naturally linked to the rose. An offering to Venus would be far more effective if accompanied by the smoke of rose petals or an anointing of rose-scented oil, a direct sensory cue that you were invoking the correct power. Similarly, Jupiter, the king of the gods, was honored with the scent of saffron, a fragrance of supreme authority and cosmic power, while the mysterious and underworldly goddesses like Hecate might be appeased with the deeper, more somber notes of myrrh or storax. This ritual use of perfume extended far beyond the grand state temples. In every Roman home, the lararium, a small shrine dedicated to the household gods, the lares and penates, was the center of daily worship. Here, the head of the family would make small offerings each day, and these almost always involved scent. A few grains of incense would be sprinkled on a tiny altar, or a drop of scented oil would be placed before the small statues. This was not a grandiose gesture, but a constant, intimate maintenance of the relationship between the family and the protective spirits that watched over the home. The smell of frankincense in the morning was as much a part of the domestic routine as the smell of baking bread. It was a way of keeping the lines of communication open, ensuring the gods remained favorable and the household prosperous. This daily ritual embedded the sacred power of perfume into the very fabric of Roman life, making it an inseparable thread connecting the mundane to the divine, the kitchen to the cosmos. Yet for all its sacred and therapeutic applications, this pervasive culture of scent was not without its fierce and vocal critics. While the elite reveled in their aromatic luxuries, a powerful countercurrent of moral outrage ran deep within Roman society, viewing perfume not as a mark of civilization, but as a symptom of its corruption. This backlash was led by staunch traditionalists who saw the growing obsession with foreign fragrances as a dangerous departure from the austere virtues that had built the Republic. No figure embodies this conservative viewpoint more powerfully than Cato the Elder, a politician and writer known for his rigid adherence to the ancient Roman ideal of mos maiorum, the way of the ancestors. For Cato, a true Roman man was defined by simplicity, discipline, and a direct connection to the land. He was a farmer and a soldier. His smell should be the honest sweat of labor or the clean scent of the field, not the effeminate and exotic aroma of Arabian spices or Persian roses. He famously and publicly denounced perfume as a Greek and Eastern vice, a corrupting influence that softened men and made them weak, vain, and untrustworthy. The heart of this moral argument hinged on two deeply interconnected anxieties: gender and foreign influence. To the conservative Roman mind, the elaborate and deliberate cultivation of personal fragrance was inherently unmasculine. A real man's worth was measured by his actions and his character, not by his allure. The time spent selecting scents and anointing the body was seen as time stolen from more valuable pursuits like politics, military training, or managing the estate. This self-pampering was associated with the world of women and, even more dangerously in their view, with Eastern cultures they considered decadent and servile. The very ingredients that made Roman perfume so desirable, frankincense from Arabia, cinnamon from beyond India, nard from the Himalayas, were constant reminders of Rome's growing entanglement with foreign lands. Critics like Cato argue that this influx of luxury was eroding the sturdy, self-reliant Roman character, replacing it with a taste for foreign extravagance that made the state vulnerable. Perfume in this context was not just a personal indulgence, it was a symbol of the moral decay that came with empire and immense wealth. This cultural battle often played out in the realm of law. Repeatedly, the Roman Senate attempted to curb such luxuries through sumptuary laws, which were regulations designed to restrict personal expenditure and reinforce social hierarchy. While these laws often targeted extravagant banquets and clothing, perfume and the expensive oils used as its base were frequently caught in the legislative crosshairs. There were attempts to limit the amount of money that could be spent on imported perfumes or to restrict their use in public ceremonies. The very fact that such laws were proposed and often ignored highlights the tension between an old guard trying to preserve an idealized past and a new reality where global trade and personal display had become inextricable parts of Roman identity. The failure of these laws is telling. The desire for perfume and the status it conferred ultimately proved stronger than the desire for legislated morality. The debate even reached the highest levels of philosophy. Stoic thinkers who valued reason, self-control, and indifference to external pleasure were particularly critical of perfumes. The great philosopher Seneca, who served as an advisor to Emperor Nero, wrote scathingly about the effeminate man who reeked of perfume, arguing that the only scent a virtuous man should carry was the honest smell of the sun and fresh air. He saw the pursuit of complex fragrances as a distraction from the pursuit of wisdom, a slavery to the senses that prevented one from achieving true inner peace. In his letters, he mocks those who need different scents for different parts of the body, seeing it as the height of ridiculous vanity. This philosophical condemnation added an intellectual weight to the moral arguments of traditionalists like Cato, framing the use of perfume not just as a social faux pas, but as a genuine impediment to a life well lived. Yet despite this powerful chorus of disapproval, the perfume trade continued to flourish. This resistance ultimately tells us less about the failure of the traditionalists and more about the irresistible power of scent itself. The moralists were fighting a battle against a fundamental human desire, the desire to transform one's experience of the world, to communicate identity, and to seek pleasure. The allure of a beautiful fragrance, its ability to evoke memory, inspire attraction, and project power, was simply too potent to be suppressed by edicts or speeches. The very fact that perfume became such a flashpoint reveals its profound importance in Roman culture. It was far more than a trifle. It was a symbol of the eternal conflict between austerity and luxury, between tradition and change, and between the values of a modest republic and the realities of a vast cosmopolitan empire. The scent of scandal, it turns out, was just as complex and enduring as the perfumes that caused it. Yet even with this immense floral diversity, the true mark of a master perfumer was not just in knowing which flower to use, but in understanding the hidden power within the plant itself. Consider the simple yet extraordinary violet. Its scent is famously ephemeral, fading almost as soon as you smell it. How could the Romans possibly capture something so fleeting? The answer reveals another layer of their ingenuity. They discovered that the violet's leaves, not its flowers, held the key. While the blossom scent vanishes quickly, the leaves contain a green, cucumber-like aroma that is much more stable. By macerating the leaves in warm oil, perfumers could create a fragrance that evoked a cool, shaded forest floor, a fresh counterpart to the heavy, solar intensity of rose and saffron. This wasn't a direct replication of the flower's scent, but an artistic interpretation, a way to bottle the very essence of the violet's natural environment. It demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of botany, an ability to look beyond the obvious and find the aromatic secret where few would think to search. But if you think the pursuit of flowers was extravagant, the Roman craving for spices takes the concept of luxury to an entirely different level. Beyond the delicate floral bouquets lay a world of bold, warm, and pungent aromas derived from the bark, roots, and berries of plants that grew in lands so remote they might as well have been mythical. Spices like cinnamon and cassia, alongside the more surprising addition of pepper, introduced a fiery, exotic richness to Roman perfumes that was as much about power as it was about pleasure. While we sprinkle cinnamon on our oatmeal and grind pepper onto our dinner, to the Roman nose, these were not mere culinary ingredients. They were the very scent of empire, of dangerous journeys, and of secrets fiercely guarded. Cinnamon and its close relative cassia were the crown jewels of spicy perfumery. The Romans adored their warm, sweet, and slightly woody aroma, which provided a foundational warmth that could balance the cool sweetness of florals or add a bold, standalone character to a masculine fragrance. But obtaining these spices was a feat of logistics and legend. The true source of cinnamon, the inner bark of a tree native to Sri Lanka, was a mystery the Romans were more than happy to embellish. Roman writers like Pliny the Elder relayed fantastical tales that were deliberately spread by Arab traders to protect their lucrative monopoly. They claimed cinnamon was gathered from the nests of enormous birds, the cinnamologus, who built their homes high on treacherous cliffs using the precious sticks. To collect it, daring traders would leave out large chunks of donkey meat for the birds to carry to their nests. The nests, overloaded with this weight, would supposedly collapse, allowing the cinnamon to be gathered from the ground below. This was a complete fabrication, of course, but it served a vital purpose. It maintained an aura of impossible danger and exoticism that justified the spice's astronomical price and kept competitors at bay. Cassia, a thicker, more robust bark with a stronger, more bittersweet scent than true cinnamon, had its own shrouded origins, said to be harvested from marshes guarded by winged beasts. The reality was that most of the cinnamon and cassia that reached Rome traveled along a complex network of trade routes. It would be harvested in Sri Lanka or Southeast Asia, shipped across the Indian Ocean to ports in southern Arabia or the Horn of Africa, and then transported by camel caravans through the deserts to the Mediterranean. At every stage of this long journey, its value increased exponentially. By the time a Roman perfumer purchased a small bundle of cinnamon quills, it was worth far more than its weight in silver. When you smell a Roman perfume recreated with cinnamon today, you are not just smelling a warm spice, you are inhaling the scent of a journey that spanned continents, a testament to the immense commercial reach of Rome. Yet perhaps the most surprising spicy note in the Roman perfumer's arsenal was pepper. We think of it as a purely culinary spice, but its sharp, pungent, and slightly woody aroma made it a fascinating and potent ingredient in certain fragrance blends. Black pepper in particular added a fiery, energetic top note that could cut through heavier, sweeter compositions, giving them a surprising lift and complexity. Its use in perfume was another demonstration of Roman pragmatism. They saw the aromatic potential in everything. A perfume intended for a statesman or military commander might include a hint of pepper to evoke a sense of vigor, authority, and worldly experience. The inclusion of such a common kitchen staple in a luxury product also highlights the blurred lines in the ancient world between the pantry and the perfume workshop, where the same precious imports could serve multiple, equally valued purposes. The deliberate obfuscation of where these spices came from was a form of economic warfare, a secret kept not by the perfumers themselves, but by the merchants and the state that benefited from the trade. By allowing and even promoting these wild stories, the Romans participated in a collective deception that added a layer of mystique to their products. For the wealthy Roman applying a cinnamon-scented oil, there was a thrill in knowing that this fragrance was connected to a world of myth and danger. This secrecy was a crucial part of the perfume's allure, transforming a simple aromatic compound into a symbol of access to the unknown. The warm, comforting scent of cinnamon, therefore, carried a cool, calculated secret at its heart, a secret of commerce, geography, and the clever manipulation of perception that made the final product infinitely more desirable. Now let's completely shift our perspective from the scented halls of power to the dust and grit of the legionary camp. It might seem like a world apart, but the Roman military had a profoundly practical, almost obsessive relationship with perfume that went far beyond a simple desire for pleasant smells. For a soldier on campaign, scent was not a luxury. It was a matter of survival, morale, and even tactical identity. The first and most obvious application was hygiene. A Roman marching camp housing thousands of men was a place where the air could quickly become thick with the smells of sweat, leather, and animals. While the famous Roman discipline extended to the construction of latrines and drainage, personal cleanliness was maintained through the use of scented oils. After a long day's march or training, a soldier would use a strigil to scrape off the grime and sweat, and then anoint his skin with simple, inexpensive oils. These weren't the complex floral bouquets of the elite. They were often scented with robust cleansing herbs like thyme, marjoram, or pine. This ritual did more than just mask odor. It was a psychological reset, a way to maintain a sense of civilization and personal dignity in the middle of a demanding campaign, helping to prevent the kind of demoralization that could spread through an army as quickly as any disease. Perhaps even more surprising was the use of perfumed oils in field medicine. The Romans had a very advanced military medical corps, and their surgeons understood the basic principles of preventing infection, even if they didn't know about germs. They observed that wounds cleaned with certain aromatic substances were less likely to become inflamed and fester. Myrrh, with its well-known antiseptic and astringent properties, was a key ingredient in many field dressings. A surgeon would clean a sword cut or a puncture wound with wine or vinegar, and then often apply a salve or oil infused with myrrh or frankincense. These resins create an environment that is hostile to bacteria, effectively helping to disinfect the injury. Lavender oil, prized for its calming scent, was also valued for its ability to soothe burns and minor skin irritations. So when a soldier reached for his personal flask of scented oil, it might have been as much a part of his first aid kit as it was for his personal comfort, a tangible tool for maintaining his most important asset, his health. But the most psychologically fascinating military use of fragrance involved the soldier's very equipment. Think about the sensory experience of a massed legion preparing for battle. The air would be filled with the nervous energy of men, the smell of their breath, the oil on their skin, and the distinct, heavy scent of their gear. Their leather armor, the lorica segmentata, and their large, curved shields, the scuta, required constant maintenance with oil to keep the leather supple and the wood from cracking. It was common practice to infuse this oil with strong, pleasant scents like cedar wood or citronella, while on a practical level, these scents helped to mask the inevitable smell of the leather tanning process and the sweat that soaked into the equipment. But on a deeper, more powerful level, it was about creating a unified sensory identity. As the Legion formed its lines, the collective aroma of hundreds of soldiers wearing similarly scented armor would have created an invisible cloud of cohesion. This shared scent reinforced the unit's identity, a constant, subtle reminder that they were not just individual fighters, but a single, disciplined organism. In the chaos of battle, that familiar smell could be a powerful anchor, a sensory touchstone of belonging and strength. This idea of scent as a psychological weapon reached its peak with the use of specific aromas linked directly to victory. No plant was more powerfully associated with Roman military success than the laurel. Woven into a crown, it was the ultimate symbol of a triumphant general. But its aromatic leaves, when crushed or burned, released a sharp, clean camphorous scent. There is strong evidence to suggest that this scent was deliberately used before battle. Imagine the scene: the legionaries lined up and waiting for the order to advance. Priests might burn laurel leaves as part of a pre-battle sacrifice, filling the air with an aroma that was synonymous with Jupiter, the king of the gods, and with Roman victory itself. Soldiers might even rub laurel-infused oil on their wrists or helmets, carrying that potent olfactory symbol of success with them into the fray. This was a form of olfactory conditioning. By associating the smell of laurel with the act of fighting and the expectation of victory, commanders were tapping into a deep well of cultural belief. Inhaling that scent was like inhaling confidence itself, a sensory prayer for divine favor that helped steel nerves and forge a collective will to win. The scent of a Roman general, therefore, wasn't just about personal vanity. It was the smell of discipline, medicine, and the unwavering expectation of triumph. And so we arrive at the moment where all our discussions of ingredients, techniques, and culture are frozen in time, preserved with breathtaking clarity by the very disaster that ended it. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD was a human tragedy of unimaginable scale, but for archaeologists, it created a unique snapshot of Roman life, and within that snapshot, the world of the perfumer is remarkably intact. A virtual walk through the streets of Pompeii and Herculaneum takes us directly into the bustling reality of the perfume trade, transforming our understanding from theoretical knowledge into tangible experience. As you turn a corner in Pompeii, you might find yourself standing before a typical officina, a workshop that is also a shop. The front of the building is open to the street, a wide counter inviting customers inside. On the wall, a faded but still vivid fresco often depicts the shop's purpose. We see images of Mercury, the god of commerce, but more specifically, we see the unguentarii himself, sometimes shown holding an alabaster bottle or standing beside shelves lined with various vessels. This was their advertisement, a bright visual sign that announced the business to a largely illiterate populace. Stepping inside, the layout is a model of efficiency. In the front room, the public area, you would find display shelves and the counter where transactions took place. But the real magic, the secret work, happened in the rooms behind or in a small courtyard out back, safely away from prying eyes. It is in these back rooms where the most telling evidence has been found. Archaeologists have uncovered the very tools of the trade we've been discussing. There are stone mortars and pestles, their surfaces worn smooth from grinding roots and spices, often still stained with the deep pigments of the materials they processed. But the most extraordinary discoveries are the containers themselves. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of pottery and glass jars, known as amphorae and unguentarii, have been found stacked in corners or buried under ash. These aren't empty. Using advanced chemical analysis techniques like gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, scientists have been able to analyze the microscopic residues left on the inner surfaces of these jars, even after 2 millennia. And the results are astonishing. They have identified the chemical fingerprints of olive oil, the base we discussed, as well as traces of pinene, a compound found in pine resin, which was likely used as a cheap fixative or to scent simpler, more affordable oils. In more elite contexts, they have found the molecular signatures of myrrh and frankincense, confirming the importation of these precious resins all the way to this provincial town. One of the most famous examples is the so-called perfume shop in Herculaneum, a more precise establishment than many in Pompeii. Here, archaeologists found a beautiful, intact wooden shelf that had been carbonized by the superheated pyroclastic flow. On that shelf were numerous small, delicate glass unguentarii, still in place, as if waiting for a customer to select one. The arrangement suggests a perfumer who catered to a wealthier clientele, offering a range of pre-made fragrances in fine containers. In a corner of the same shop, a large, lead-lined vat was discovered. This was likely used for the maceration process, where flowers or spices would be steeped in warm oil for weeks on end. The lead lining was crucial. It prevented the oil from reacting with a porous terracotta or stone container, which could impart off flavors and ruin the delicate scent. This single detail speaks volumes about the perfumer's understanding of material science and his commitment to quality control. Perhaps the most poignant finds are not the grand shops, but the smaller, home-based operations. In the house of the Vettii in Pompeii, a luxurious residence owned by wealthy merchants, a complete perfume-making setup was found in a room just off the garden. This wasn't for commercial sale, but for personal use. It contained small, exquisite glass vessels, tiny spoons for measuring, and even a small, portable brazier for gentle heating. This tells us that the very wealthy did not just buy their perfumes. They sometimes employed their own skilled slaves or hired artisans to create custom, bespoke fragrances within the home, treating perfume making as a sophisticated domestic art, a hobby for the ultra-elite. It underscores the idea that one's signature scent was a deeply personal statement, worthy of this level of individualized attention. Walking through these spaces, you can almost hear the chatter of customers, smell the complex aroma of a dozen different infusions wafting from the back room, and see the master perfumer, his fingers stained with saffron, carefully pouring a new creation into a delicate alabaster bottle. The archaeological record from Pompeii and Herculaneum does more than just confirm what ancient writers like Pliny told us. It adds a human dimension. It shows us the soot marks on the bottom of a heating pot, the worn spot on the floor where an apprentice stood grinding spices day after day, the careful organization of jars that indicates a system, a methodology. This was not a mysterious, lost art practiced by mythical figures. It was a vibrant, everyday industry conducted by real people in real workshops. The ash of Vesuvius preserved not just objects, but the very atmosphere of their craft, allowing us, centuries later, to finally step across the threshold and breathe in the world of the Roman perfumer. So the question becomes, if we have these ancient recipes and we've uncovered their tools, can we actually smell what the Romans smelled? Can we recreate their legendary perfumes today? This is the fascinating mission of a small group of historians, archaeologists, and master perfumers who are attempting to bridge a 2,000-year gap, not just through texts, but through our most evocative scents. The process is part detective story, part scientific experiment, and part artistic interpretation, and it begins not in a perfumer's workshop, but in a laboratory. Modern science provides the first crucial key with a technique called gas chromatography, mass spectrometry. This powerful tool allows researchers to analyze the microscopic residues found inside those ancient pottery and glass unguentarii from Pompeii and other sites. Think of it as a chemical time machine. The machine vaporizes a tiny, almost invisible sample of the residue, separating it into its individual chemical components. Each molecule has a specific weight and signature, and the mass spectrometer acts as a sort of molecular fingerprint scanner, identifying the exact compounds present. This is how we can say with certainty that a particular jar once held olive oil infused with pine resin, or that another contained the distinct chemical markers of myrrh. But identifying the ingredients is only the first, and in some ways the simplest, part of the challenge. The real difficulty lies in the interpretation. The chemical fingerprint might tell us that a sample contains oleic acid from olive oil and a compound called germacrin, which is found in myrrh, but it doesn't tell us the proportions. Was it a few drops of myrrh in a large vat of oil or an equal parts blend? It also doesn't reveal the quality of the original ingredients. The myrrh used in a first-century Pompeian shop likely had a slightly different chemical profile than myrrh harvested today from the same region, due to variations in soil, climate, and processing methods. Furthermore, over 2 millennia, many of the most volatile top notes, the very first sense you perceive in a fragrance, have completely evaporated, leaving behind only the heavier base note molecules. This means the chemical profile we recover is often incomplete, like a musical score where the melody lines for the violins have faded away, leaving only the deep notes of the cellos and double basses. The modern recreator is left to deduce what the missing notes might have been. This is where the perfumer's art must take over from the scientist's data. Using the chemical analysis as a guide, a perfumer will begin to construct a fragrance using modern equivalents of the ancient ingredients. They might source a high-quality olive oil, perhaps even attempting to create a version of omphacium from green olives. They will acquire myrrh resin and rose absolute, but then comes the moment of truth, blending them according to the scant instructions from Pliny or other sources. And this is where the project often encounters its most startling revelation. Sometimes the resulting scent is not what we would consider pleasant at all. Our modern noses, trained by centuries of fragrance evolution, are accustomed to certain scent profiles: clean, sweet, often synthetic musks and aldehydes. The Roman palate was entirely different. They had a much higher tolerance for and even a distinct preference for what we would call animalic or balsamic notes. A recreation of a popular Roman perfume might smell intensely medicinal, like a strong cough syrup, or have a pronounced smoky, leathery character that feels overwhelming to us. Some blends heavy with costus root or a hint of castoreum can have a damp, earthy, almost fungal quality that modern testers frequently describe as challenging or outright unpleasant. This divergence in taste is not a failure, it's a profound success. It forces us to confront the sheer otherness of the past. It reminds us that smell is not a universal constant, but a cultural construct. What smelled like luxury and divine connection to a Roman senator might smell like something entirely different to us. This sensory gap is perhaps the most direct bridge to understanding the Roman mind. Their world was one where strong primal smells were a fact of life: the smell of animal sacrifices in the temple, the odor of tanneries and open sewers in the city, the rustic scent of the farm. In that context, a powerful, complex perfume wasn't meant to be a faint whisper. It was meant to be a bold statement that could cut through the ambient odors of ancient life and assert its presence. It was meant to be smelled and remembered. The final layer of challenge lies in the aging process. A modern perfumer creating a Roman scent faces a paradoxical problem. We will never know how the original truly smelled when it was fresh. A newly made recreation of rhodonum with its rose, myrrh, and honey might be bright and sharp initially, but the Romans valued aged perfumes, often storing them for years, even decades, to allow the components to marry and mellow. How did that aging process in an alabaster jar, exposed to subtle temperature changes over time, alter the fragrance? It's a variable that is almost impossible to replicate in a modern laboratory on a short timeline. Each attempt at recreation, therefore, is not a definitive answer, but a hypothesis, an educated guess that brings us one step closer to the past. It is a collaboration across centuries where ancient residue meets modern technology and where scientific data is filtered through the intuition of an artist, all in an effort to capture a ghost, the most fleeting and personal of historical artifacts, a forgotten breath of air. Of all the legendary scents that filled the Roman world, few were as celebrated or as enigmatic as Susanum, the lily perfume. To understand its appeal, we need to move beyond our modern conception of a simple floral bouquet. Susanum was not a straightforward lily scent. It was a sophisticated symphony, a carefully orchestrated balance of delicate beauty and potent power. Its very name, derived from the Greek word for lily, sausin, hints at its primary note, but the magic of Susanum lay in the chorus of other voices that surrounded that central theme. The surviving recipes, notably from Pliny, list its core components: lily petals, of course, but also saffron, myrrh, and cinnamon. At first glance, this combination seems almost contradictory. How could the virginal, trumpet-like fragrance of the lily possibly harmonize with the pungent, golden spice of saffron, the smoky depth of myrrh, and the warm, woody kick of cinnamon? The answer reveals a profound Roman preference for complexity over simplicity, for fragrances that evolved on the skin and told a story throughout the day. The process of creating Susanum would have been a masterclass in patience and precision. It likely began with the most delicate part, capturing the lily's soul. Given the fragility of lily blossoms, the perfumer would almost certainly have used the labor-intensive technique of enfleurage. Thousands of white lilies, perhaps the revered Madonna lily native to the Mediterranean, would have been harvested at their peak. Their petals would be painstakingly pressed between layers of cool, purified fat, allowing their aromatic essence to slowly, passively seep into the unctuous base over days or weeks. This method would preserve the lily's true character, its green, slightly waxy stem note and its sweet, almost intoxicating floral heart, without being destroyed by heat. Meanwhile, in another part of the workshop, a separate infusion will be prepared. Saffron threads and crushed cinnamon bark will be gently warmed in a base of the finest omphacium oil, releasing their intense, spicy aromas into the neutral fat. The true artistry came in the blending. The perfumer would combine the lily-infused pomade with the saffron cinnamon oil and then introduce the final crucial ingredient, myrrh. The myrrh was not added for its own prominent scent, but to act as the great unifier, the fixative that would bind this seemingly disparate chorus together. Its resinous balsamic character would provide a deep, warm foundation, a stage upon which the other scents could perform. So what would the final product have actually smelled like? Imagine the first impression upon opening the alabaster bottle, a bright, almost startling burst of pure lily, fresh and dewy, but within minutes, as the perfume met the warmth of the skin, the other players would emerge. The saffron would add a luxurious, honeyed and slightly bitter undertone, giving the floral sweetness a regal, golden weight. The cinnamon would provide a flicker of warmth and exotic spice, a subtle vibration that prevented the scent from becoming too placid or sweet. And underlying it all, the myrrh would lend a smoky, incense-like depth, a serious, almost sacred quality that gave the fragrance incredible longevity and a sophisticated, mature dry down. This complex profile tells us exactly why Susanum was so adored by the Roman elite. It was a fragrance of fascinating contrasts. It managed to be both innocent and worldly, both fresh and profound. It evoked the pure white blossom of the lily, a flower associated with Juno, the queen of the gods, and thus with nobility and majesty. Yet it was grounded by the expensive imported spices that spoke of global trade, power, and a sophisticated palate. Wearing Susanum was a statement of refined taste. It demonstrated an appreciation for a scent that was not immediately obvious, one that required time to reveal its full complexity, much like a well-bred individual whose depth of character unfolds gradually. It was the olfactory equivalent of a multi-course banquet, offering a different sensory experience with each passing hour, a far cry from a simple, one-note floral water. In the competitive social world of Rome, a perfume like Susanum was the ultimate accessory for someone who wished to be perceived as both elegant and intriguing, a person of subtle depths whose true nature was worth discovering. But this breathtaking world of scented artistry and imperial indulgence came with an immense price tag, one that effectively divided Roman society along olfactory lines. The cost of a fine perfume wasn't just about the bottle. It was the final expression of a staggering economic pyramid built on global trade, perilous journeys, and specialized labor. To understand why a small vial of scented oil could cost more than a soldier's annual salary, we have to follow the money from the distant source of an ingredient, all the way to the wrist of a wealthy patrician. The journey of a single ingredient like that precious myrrh from southern Arabia reveals the true engine of cost. After being carefully tapped from the scraggly trees, the raw resin will be loaded onto camels for a grueling overland trek across deserts controlled by nomadic tribes who demanded hefty tolls for safe passage. Once it reached a Red Sea port, it was transferred to a ship that had to navigate seasonal monsoons and the constant threat of pirates. Upon arriving in Egypt, it was taxed by Roman customs officials, then reloaded onto another ship heading for port like Puteoli in Italy, where it was taxed again. Finally, it traveled by cart over Roman roads to a distributor in Rome or Capua. At every single stage of this months-long journey, a profit margin was added. By the time that lump of myrrh reached the unguentarii on the Saplasia, its price had been multiplied 50 or 100 times over its original value. The cost of labor was another decisive factor. Remember the painstaking process of enfleurage used for capturing the scent of delicate flowers like roses and lilies. That wasn't a quick procedure. It required teams of workers to harvest thousands of petals by hand at dawn, then spend days or weeks meticulously pressing them between layers of fat, scraping away the spent blossoms and repeating the process over and over. This was not mechanized labor. It was a craft of immense patience and skill. The master perfumer himself was a highly trained specialist, often from a family that had guarded its recipes for generations. His knowledge was his capital, and his fee for creating a bespoke fragrance for a wealthy client reflected that exclusive expertise. When you purchased a bottle of a renowned perfume like Susanum, you weren't just paying for the ingredients, you were paying for the hundreds of hours of skilled and unskilled labor that went into its creation, from the camel driver in Arabia to the apprentice grinding spices in a smoky workshop. This convergence of exorbitant raw material costs and intensive craftsmanship meant that fine perfume was without question a symbol of the elite. For the senatorial class and the ultra-wealthy equestrians, the ability to anoint themselves with these costly scents was a non-negotiable aspect of their social identity. Wearing a perfume worth thousands of sesterces was as clear a status signal as wearing a purple-bordered toga or owning a villa with ocean views. It was a form of conspicuous consumption that demonstrated their access to global networks and their disposable income. The Roman poet Juvenal, with his characteristic satire, mocks a wealthy man who complains about his financial troubles while simultaneously dousing himself in perfumes so expensive they could have fed an entire family for a year. This highlights the incredible disparity. The same amount of money that represented a life of luxury for one person could represent survival for another. So what about the common people, the soldiers, the merchants, the farmers, the countless citizens who filled the insulae, the Roman apartment blocks? They were not living in an odorless world. They too sought to improve their scent, but their options were vastly different and deeply rooted in the local landscape. Instead of imported myrrh and Arabian frankincense, the average Roman might create a simple homemade fragrance by steeping readily available herbs like thyme, rosemary, or lavender in a base of cheaper, less refined olive oil. They might use wildflowers picked from the countryside or the sharp, cleansing scent of pine needles. These weren't complex blends aged for months. They were practical infusions made in the home, designed to mask the less pleasant smells of urban life and provide a sense of modest cleanliness and well-being. A soldier might carry a small pouch of dried lavender to keep his kit smelling fresh, or a market vendor might rub a sprig of rosemary on their wrists to combat the odors of the forum. This created a stark sensory divide in Roman society. You could literally smell a person's social class as they walked past you. The air around a senator would be a complex, evolving cloud of rose, saffron, and myrrh, a scent that spoke of unimaginable wealth and global reach. The air around a carpenter or a baker would carry the simpler, sharper, more rustic aromas of local herbs and honest sweat. This divide was so pronounced that certain scents became culturally coded. The heavy, spicy, animalic perfumes of the elite were often viewed with suspicion and disdain by more conservative Romans, who saw them as foreign and effeminate. Meanwhile, the simple smell of thyme or laurel was associated with traditional Roman virtues, with military discipline, and with a connection to the Italian soil. This wasn't just a difference in preference, it was a fragrant manifestation of the deep social and economic inequalities that characterized the Roman world. a reminder that even the air you breathed was a commodity whose quality was determined by the size of your purse. The world of intoxicating scents did not simply vanish with the fall of the Roman Empire, but its center of gravity shifted dramatically. The collapse of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century shattered the intricate trade networks that had funneled cinnamon from Sri Lanka and myrrh from Arabia to the workshops of Capua. The unified economic zone that allowed for such extravagant luxury fractured into smaller, more isolated kingdoms, and the demand for and access to such exotic ingredients plummeted. The grand unguentarii shops on the Saplasia fell silent, their complex recipes for fragrances like Susanum becoming impractical dreams in a world now preoccupied with survival and basic subsistence. The art of perfumery, once a sophisticated, continent-spanning industry, was forced into a long period of retreat and simplification, surviving primarily within the protective walls of two key institutions, the monastery and the emerging Islamic world. Within the secluded scriptoria of European monasteries, the knowledge of the Romans was not lost but transformed. Monks, who were among the few who could still read and write, meticulously copied ancient texts, including the works of Pliny the Elder that described perfume recipes. But their interest was not in creating luxurious scents for banquets. For them, perfume was medicine. The monastic garden became the new source of aroma, cultivated not for beauty but for healing. Herbs like lavender, rosemary, sage, and thyme were grown, harvested, and infused into simple oils, or distilled into early forms of aqua vitae for their antiseptic and therapeutic properties. This was a direct continuation of the Roman belief in the medicinal power of scent, but stripped of its paganism and its extravagance. The knowledge of how to capture a flower's essence through inflorescence was likely forgotten in the West, replaced by the more pragmatic skills of the herbalist. The scent of sanctity in early medieval Europe was no longer the complex bouquet of a Roman feast, but the clean, sharp, and medicinal aroma of a monastery infirmary. While Western Europe entered a period often called the Dark Ages in terms of luxury goods, the flame of advanced perfumery was kept brilliantly alight in the Islamic world. Here, the intellectual traditions of Greece and Rome were not only preserved but enthusiastically advanced. Islamic scholars and chemists, like the Persian polymath Avicenna, made monumental improvements to the distillation process that the Romans had only tentatively explored. They perfected the alembic still, using it not for alchemical pursuits, but for the systematic and efficient extraction of essential oils from roses and other flowers. This technological leap was arguably the most significant development in perfumery since Roman times. The results were revolutionary: pure, concentrated floral waters and attars that were far more potent and stable than the oil-based infusions of antiquity. As Islamic culture expanded across the Middle East, North Africa, and into Spain, it brought this advanced perfumery with it, reintroducing a more sophisticated culture of scent to the European periphery. The real turning point, the moment when the scattered threads of Roman knowledge were woven back together, occurred in the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance. Two major events acted as catalysts. First, the Crusades, beginning in the 11th century, brought European knights into direct contact with the luxurious and fragrant cultures of the Middle East. Soldiers returning from the Holy Land brought back not only tales of battle but also exotic souvenirs, silks, spices, and, crucially, new kinds of perfumes and the knowledge of how they were made. The second event was the rise of international trade through powerful Italian city-states like Venice and Genoa. These maritime republics re-established the trade routes that had once supplied ancient Rome, now bringing precious spices and raw materials for perfume directly from the East to eager European markets. The stage was being set for a rebirth. It was in this fertile environment that a specific location emerged as the new Capua, the undisputed world capital of perfume, Grasse in the south of France. The connection to the Roman legacy here is surprisingly direct. Initially, Grasse was not a perfume town at all. It was a center for leather tanning, a notoriously foul-smelling industry. In the 16th century, the local tanners began to produce scented leather goods, particularly perfumed gloves, to make their products more appealing. They used the same techniques that Roman soldiers had used to scent their leather armor, infusing oils with local herbs and flowers, but Grasse had a magical advantage: a perfect microclimate with abundant sun and water. ideal for growing the most fragrant flowers imaginable: jasmine, roses, orange blossoms, and lavender. The town swiftly pivoted from tanning to cultivating flowers and mastering the art of extraction, and here, the knowledge preserved by the Islamic world returned with a vengeance. The technique of distillation, perfected in the East, became the foundation of Grass's industry, allowing them to produce quantities of essential oil that the Romans, with their labor-intensive enfleurage, could never have matched. The legacy of Roman perfume is therefore not a specific recipe that survived, but a foundational set of principles that still underpin modern perfumery today. The Roman structure of a fragrance: a top note for immediate impression, a heart note for the main body, and a base note with fixatives for longevity, is the very architecture of every perfume on the market. When a perfumer in Grasse or New York uses myrrh or labdanum as a fixative to anchor a floral scent, they are applying a principle that a Roman unguentarius would have understood perfectly. The modern use of animal-derived notes like synthetic musks and ambers to add sensuality and depth is a direct echo of the Roman appreciation for ingredients like castoreum. Even our cultural associations have roots in that ancient world. The rose remains a symbol of romance and femininity, a link that stretches back in an unbroken chain to the festivals of Venus. So the next time you spritz on a complex, beautifully balanced fragrance, pause for a moment to appreciate the incredible journey behind it. In that bottle, you hold the echoes of Nero's rose petal showers, the empirical ingenuity of the Saplesia workshops, the medicinal wisdom of the monastic gardens, and the chemical brilliance of Islamic alchemists. The fall of Rome may have scattered this knowledge to the winds, but like the tenacious scent of a well-crafted perfume, it lingered, found new vessels, and eventually blossomed again into an art form that continues to captivate us. The secrets of Roman perfume making were never truly lost. They were simply waiting for the right moment to be rediscovered, reminding us that the most powerful stories are sometimes those we can still smell. Now, when we picture ancient Romans drenched in perfume, a very specific and frankly unflattering Hollywood image often comes to mind: a toga-clad nobleman lounging in a decadent villa, practically swimming in scent to mask the fact that he hasn't bathed in weeks. This persistent myth suggests that Romans used perfume as a primitive and heavy-handed deodorant, a crude cover-up for a society that was fundamentally unclean. But this could not be further from the sophisticated reality. The truth is, the Roman relationship with cleanliness and fragrance was incredibly advanced and nuanced, built on a foundation of meticulous hygiene that puts the myth of the perpetually stinking Roman to rest for good. To understand why the cover-up theory is so wrong, we have to start with the most important social institution in any Roman city: the public baths. A visit to the thermae was not an occasional luxury, it was a daily ritual for citizens of all classes. These were not just places to get clean, they were sprawling community centers with libraries, gymnasiums, and gardens. The bathing process itself was a detailed and thorough affair. A Roman would first exercise to work up a sweat, then move through a series of rooms of increasing heat: the warm room, the hot room, and a steam room. They would then scrape their skin clean with a curved tool called a strigil, removing dirt, sweat, and oil. Finally, they would take a plunge in a cold pool to close the pores. Only after this complete cleansing ritual would they even think about applying perfume. The scent was not a substitute for washing. It was the final, finishing touch on a clean canvas, a way to moisturize the skin and add a personal aromatic signature. Applying a heavy, pungent perfume to a dirty body would have been considered as nonsensical and unpleasant to a Roman as it would be to us today. The real artistry lay not in drowning out odor, but in the sophisticated practice of scent layering. Romans didn't just slap on one perfume and call it a day. They built their fragrance experience from the ground up, much like a modern perfumer constructs a scent with top, middle, and base notes. This started with the very materials used in the bath. The water itself was often scented with essential oils or flower petals. After bathing, a Roman would be massaged from head to toe with simple, lightly scented base oils, perhaps infused with lavender or pine to hydrate the skin. Then and only then would they apply their primary perfume, the unguentum, to specific pulse points like the wrists, neck, and behind the ears. This created a multi-layered olfactory effect. The scent would evolve throughout the day, reacting with the individual's unique body heat and the foundational layers of oil. A well-crafted Roman perfume was designed to be noticed as you moved closer to someone, not to announce your arrival from across a crowded room with an overwhelming wave. It was an intimate, personal luxury, not a public fumigation. This practice reveals a highly refined cultural understanding of scent. The Romans were connoisseurs, not brute force users. They valued complexity, longevity, and the subtle interplay of different aromas. A writer like Pliny the Elder even complained about the overuse of certain perfumes, criticizing those who drenched themselves in a way that was offensive to others. This critique itself is powerful evidence that the social norm was moderation and artistry, not excess. The goal was to create a pleasing aura that complemented the natural scent of clean skin, not to obliterate it. The myth of the stinky Roman, therefore, says more about our own modern projections and a misunderstanding of their daily routines than it does about historical reality. It ignores the vast archaeological evidence of their elaborate aqueducts, sewer systems, and the remains of hundreds of bathhouses found across the empire, all testifying to a society that placed a premium on public and private cleanliness. So where did this enduring myth come from? It likely stems from a few sources, mixed together over time. First, there were certainly critics within Roman society itself, like the staunch traditionalists we discussed earlier, who exaggerated the decadence of the elite as a moral warning. When a satirist like Juvenal writes about a dandy reeking of perfume, he is employing hyperbole for comic and critical effect, not writing a factual report. Second, later historians, particularly from Victorian eras that had their own complicated relationship with bathing, may have misinterpreted these satirical accounts as literal truth. Finally, there's the simple fact of urban life before modern sanitation. While Romans were remarkably clean personally, any large pre-industrial city would have had areas with strong smells from tanneries, fish markets, and crowded living conditions. The pleasant, controlled fragrance of a fine perfume offered a portable oasis of personal pleasantness in that environment, a practice we still understand today. The key takeaway is that Roman perfume was the product of a refined and hygienic culture, not a desperate attempt to cover up a lack of one. It was the final flourish of an artful daily routine, a symbol of civilization itself. So as we've journeyed through the smoky workshops and scented palaces of ancient Rome, several extraordinary secrets have come to light, revealing a craft of astonishing sophistication. We uncovered the staggering global network that brought cinnamon from Sri Lanka and myrrh from Arabia, a trade so vital it shaped economies and funded empires. We learned that the very foundation of their art was not alcohol, but olive oil, a humble ingredient transformed into a perfect vessel for capturing and slowly releasing fragrance. We marveled at their technical genius, from the patient magic of enfleurage for delicate flowers to the tantalizing possibility that they were pioneering the principles of distillation long before we thought possible. And perhaps most importantly, we saw that perfume was never just a pleasant smell. It was a language spoken in temples to honor the gods, a badge of status in the forum, a form of medicine in the home, and a tool for morale in the military camp. These ancient practices are not relics of a forgotten world. They are the very roots of our modern love affair with fragrance. The next time you sample a complex scent at a boutique, think about the Roman unguentarii on the Septuagint, his nose discerning the perfect balance between rose and myrrh. When you notice how a fragrance changes on your skin over hours, remember the Roman understanding of base notes and fixatives, designed to create a personal, evolving aromatic journey. That timeless human desire to express identity, to attract, to heal, and to connect with something greater than ourselves through the power of scent. It's a story that began not in a modern laboratory, but in the bustling, fragrant heart of the Roman Empire. The secrets of their perfume making show us that the pursuit of beauty is a fundamental thread in the human story, a thread that connects us across the centuries with every bottle we open today. If you enjoyed this journey into the scented past and want to explore more ancient mysteries, make sure to subscribe for our next adventure.